what I was teaching him were patterns of fear-based coercion and cooperation, that in order to get something, you needed to have a threat or a bribe. What I was showing him was a very conditional love, and my expectations were grossly larger than what he was able to do at 3, 4, and 5 years old. So how I really break this down is I call these the response-able parenting tools, right? So you can be responsible and make sure that your child is achieving all the things, getting all the things. But when you are response-able, you're really choosing with intention, with knowledge, with compassion, with empathy, how to respond to your child in the moment versus react to their really frustrating behaviors. Hi, my name is Becky Jennings, and this is the Response-Able Parenting Podcast. I give you the transformational tools to stop reacting to your children in the moment and start responding with intention. Hello, and welcome to Responsible Parenting. My name is Becky Jennings, and I am here to talk about all things parenting. I give you the transformational tools to stop reacting in the moment to your children and start responding with intention. So I'm very excited. I haven't been in the podcasting seat for almost 4 years, no, for 3.5 years now. The first podcast that I did was in 2019, and it was all around death. Sounds like a crazy topic, I know. Maybe not one that at all is similar to parenting, but it was a huge part of my journey. So basically, I had a stillbirth in 2019, and it really shaped and changed the way that I viewed life, that I experienced my children. And so I created a whole podcast through my grieving experience. It's called Don't Send Flowers. And it was all about how to, interestingly enough, respond to people who are experiencing grief and trauma in a more intentional and appropriate way. That podcast for me was very encapsulated in a healing moment for me. It was a huge tool for me to interview other people who were also experiencing grief and trauma, and to be able to learn from their experiences and link them together. So I've taken a break for a while, and now I'm back in the podcasting seat, and I am here to talk about parenting. Parenting is not easy. Oh my goodness. I have 2 living children. One is about to turn 6 and one just turned 3. And I would say that I have experienced a lot of intensity with especially my older one, very deeply feeling child. On his very first parent-teacher conference, he was about 3 years old. The teachers told us that he had behavioral issues, and that they were pretty strong behavioral issues, and that we needed to address them with therapies, and we needed to get him assessed, and we needed him to see a speech pathologist and audiologist to test to see if he could actually hear people. We needed to get him into occupational therapy. The list went on and on. So I left that parent-teacher conference confused, sad, having no idea where to go with this new information. I hadn't really seen what they were talking about as behavioral issues. I really saw them as perfectly normal developmental things that my child was doing and exhibiting. We had also, in context, he had spent 6 months at home with a brand new baby after the death of his brother. And we were in the pandemic and lockdown, so he hadn't seen anybody in months. And so I looked at this as not developmental issues, or behavioral issues, but that he was behind a little bit because of a lot of external situations. Well, they didn't see it like that. And we were really pressed and pushed to take a more punitive approach to our parenting, more punishments, reward charts. We were told to do more timeouts. We were told to remove him from situations, be very strict, hold really firm boundaries. There was a lot of intensity that happened from then on. My husband and I, nightly, we would look at each other and be like, thank God he's resilient. Thank God he's so resilient. But after time, his resiliency was gone. There was just not that happy boy. He was losing his connection with us. You could tell he didn't feel safe around us. You could tell he was confused, he was lost in the moment. He had no skills, yet we were demanding all sorts of things from him. And it was a really, really rough 2 years. So for 2 years, we implemented lots of timeouts that we disguised as breaks. We would pick him up physically and move him out of the room as fast as possible to get him away from other kids if he was doing something wrong. So much yelling, so much punishment, taking away things, consequences, even a spanking, and it was not going well. I could see him really losing himself. He did not know what he was allowed to do. In his body, he was developing at the exact same pace that everybody was developing, but we were telling him he was behind, that he was late, that he should be doing better, that he should know better, he should. We really did him a disservice for 2 years, and it breaks my heart that that was his experience. You know, before our son passed away, Hunter was 22 months when our son passed away. And we had the most connected, attached, like really securely attached parenting child dynamic. And then I can't even imagine what must have been going through his brain where his brother passed away. Mommy and daddy are, clinging to him with like just utter rapture and love. And our connection just grows deeper and deeper and deeper. And then I get pregnant again. I have the baby. So all of that, he has to be more quiet. He has to be more careful. Like all of those rules start to get imposed. And this is right when the school started telling us that we needed to do all this punitive style punishments. And then the pandemic hit 5 weeks later. And so all of his outlet of friends and being able to blow off steam, all of that goes away. And then on top of it, we just are constantly doubling down on just this really intense rule-based new life. And it must have been really confusing, triggering, sad, upsetting for him. And unfortunately, we just did not take the time and we did not have the skills to see it any other way. Every single time he had an outburst, it just continued to be confirmation to us that he really did have behavioral issues. Every single time he would lash out in a bigger and bigger way, we doubled down saying that this just shows that we need to be stricter. This just tells us that we need to take away more. We need to isolate you more. We need to have longer timeouts, longer breaks. And it just kept amplifying. Never once did his behavior improve. There might be a temporary moment where his behavior was just slightly better from fear, but other than that, his behavior got worse and worse and worse. So I dove in headfirst to all the podcasts. I read tons of parenting books. I was taking workshops on behavior. I was taking problem child courses. You name it, I was like in the throes of trying to figure this out. I would try a strategy. It would work for a second, but then we'd go right back to the punitive style punishments. I would try another way to connect, and then we'd go right back to the same pattern. So for him, it was very confusing. He didn't know whether to trust that we were going to be these great, loving, kind parents that listened to him and validated his feelings, or if, the other shoe was going to drop and we were going to send him to timeout, or we were going to take away a toy, or we were going to remove him from the playground. So that must have been incredibly confusing. And now that I have the science and, knowledge about what was happening, I know the cost and the toll that it was taking on him. And that makes me really sad. So I started taking parent coaching courses because while I had a lot of knowledge about childhood development, neuroscience, it was all just sound bites. And I really wanted to get the full breadth and the full exposure to how I could help and how I could raise a child to be more whole in their body, how I could raise a child to be more emotionally intelligent, to make better decisions, to feel safe, to feel secure, and to really give him all of the opportunity to feel safe with us, especially in the harder moments that are coming up in life, the teenage years and beyond. So I went down the rabbit hole and I became a parent coach. And oh my gosh, I have learned so much. And so this is really a place where I get to share a lot with you. As I was trying to figure out how I was going to framework my method, something kept popping into my head that I was a responsible parent, but I wasn't a response-able parent, meaning his body was safe, right? His body was fed, his body was getting from one place to the next, his body was in school, his body was taking sports and, and he was getting to where he needed to be and doing the things he needed to do, but I wasn't being responsible with his emotions and with his feelings and with his brain. What I was teaching him were patterns of fear-based coercion and cooperation, that in order to get something, you needed to have a threat or a bribe. What I was showing him was a very conditional love, and my expectations were grossly larger than what he was able to do at 3, 4, and 5 years old. So how I really break this down is I call these the response-able parenting tools, right? So you can be responsible and make sure that your child is achieving all the things, getting all the things. But when you are response-able, you're really choosing with intention, with knowledge, with compassion, with empathy, how to respond to your child in the moment versus react to their really frustrating behaviors. And unfortunately, we cannot do that with willpower alone. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I break it down into 6 things. And throughout this podcast, I'll be weaving in all 6. Maybe I'll focus on just one of the tools for a series, but you'll really hear a lot about these 6 all throughout, and they are the foundation to help you as the parent become a responsible parent. This isn't a podcast that's going to teach you about behavioral modifications for your children. This isn't going to be a podcast that gives you just endless scripts and strategies. What this podcast is going to do, it's going to teach you as the parent how to better equip yourself so that you can handle the emotional waves of your children. So let's break it down into the 6 steps. So number 1, which I think is super important, maybe the foundation of everything, is for the very first time, maybe in your life, you will gain awareness of your default patterns as a person, as a parent, as a partner, as a spouse. You'll learn your default patterns. You'll gain an awareness of how you react to certain things in the moment. And then we're going to start learning what your body is sending you as stress cues. When you have this information, everything becomes, how do I say it? It's less like, when you become more aware, it gets smaller, right? So we talk about something where if you can name it, you can tame it. So if you're feeling angry and you're just like a volcano and you're bubbling up and you're bubbling up, but if you say, oh my gosh, I realize right now I'm angry. Just even saying I'm angry puts like a little pause button on everything. So the first step is just that understanding and the awareness of your default patterns, because unless we know that, we can't change anything. All right, so the next one is we're going to dive deep into how you can ground yourself in the moment so that you can not say the things that are probably you really want to say that can damage your connection, damage your relationship, and create a belief system within your child that will live on with them for a very long time, that in the moment might feel really good to say, but will have lasting damage to your child. So we're going to establish a personal grounding routine for in the moment conflict so that you have within your arsenal, within your tool belt, things that you can go to, whether they be physical, mental, however we figure that out, something that you can go to so that you can arm yourself in the moment to be able to calm your body down so that you can respond appropriately versus just react with that anger, that rage, that frustration. The other thing is to dive, number three, we're diving deep into nervous system regulation skills. So our bodies are wired to let us know if we're in danger, right? I call this your internal threat detection system. And it is vital for us to understand what those nervous system cues are telling us, right? So, it might be that your fists are getting tighter, or that your jaw is getting really rigid and you're gnashing your teeth a little bit, or it could be that you feel your heart rate quickening, could be that you start to sweat a little bit. These are all your body's cues telling you that what's happening right now does not feel safe, does not feel good, and it wants it to stop. Generally, in a reactive moment, we're going to respond with, a threat. We're going to respond with maybe a hit. We're going to respond with yelling or screaming. And that is just our default mechanism for safety. But when we become aware of these cues, you're like, oh, that's my body again telling me that I'm not safe. Huh, that's interesting. It does it every single time my child screams for another piece of candy. Oh, my body does that every single time that if I say no and they ask again, I start sweating every single time that happens. We begin to get a sense of what our nervous system cues are, and then we learn the tools how to counteract that seethe, right? How to in the moment learn what we can do. And there's a ton of different tools that I'll be sharing throughout this, but different ways that you can learn how to calm your nervous system down, again, so that you can respond appropriately and respond with intention. The other thing is, I mentioned earlier, I do not believe that we can do parenting on willpower alone. It is impossible. I mean, how many mornings do you wake up and you say, I'm not going to yell? I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to yell. Today's the day. I'm not going to do it. And then by 7 a.m., the wheels have fallen off, you're screaming and yelling, people are crying, you're barely getting out the door, and you're like, how do I do this? So I believe it's very important to focus on skill power versus willpower. And a lot of that comes with the skill of repair and the skill to learn how to connect with your child. I think the number one skill is repair. I heard something today, uh, which is kind of amazing that it was like right at this exact time I was going to be talking about this, but that we miss 70% of our child's attempt to connect with us. We miss 70% of those attempts from our child. And even if we miss those 70 attempts from our child, but we go back and we repair with them, that is more significant to the child than all of those 70 attempts or 70% attempts that we missed. That repair and that reconnection is so vitally important to the success of a securely attached relationship with your children. All right. We also are going to have a lot of childhood development science and childhood development awareness. I think it is so important to actually understand where your child is and what's appropriate for us to expect of them. We do a huge amount of adultifying our children. We have huge expectations of their abilities because some moment they might seem super profound and they might seem way bigger. And then the next, they're like a toddler again, and it's so confusing as a parent. You just did this. How come you're acting like this again? And so for me, it's a huge joy that I get to share a lot of childhood development and a lot of childhood neuroscience so that you can understand where your child's coming from. So it's not so frustrating for you, not so confusing for you. And last, we're going to understand the behavior, or what is underneath the behavior, is what I would try to say. So basically, all behavior is goal directive. And so we need to be able to get curious and figure out what is our child's unmet need under this really frustrating, really annoying behavior. Once we can do that, we have a lot more compassion for our child to understand, oh, the reason you're doing da 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 XYZ is because you have this unmet need. And when we can do that, we not only show our child that we're willing to respect their needs, that their needs matter, that they're worthy enough to be seen, heard, and understood, but it also softens the whole situation so that you can be less reactive and more responsible in your parenting technique going forward. So that is what my podcast is going to be all about. I am really excited to do this. I'm really excited to share all that I have learned. I'm going to be sharing real time examples in my own house. I am definitely going to be sharing a lot of my failures and some of my wins. I feel like for the past few years, it's been more failure than win, but we're all learning, right? So I'm very excited to share this with you. I hope that this brings you a lot of hope, that you might find exactly what you're looking for, that something in what I just said resonated with you, saying that is exactly what I need to hear on a regular basis. I'm very excited for this journey. Welcome to the Response Able Parenting Podcast. I am so glad you're here, and I hope I can provide you with a lot of value. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Response Able Parenting Podcast. If you like what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from this podcast, I'd be honored if you'd share the episode with them. Until next time, know that you are enough. You are capable. You've made it through all of your hardest days, and we will keep growing on this parenting journey together.